My name is Willem Ellis, and I'll be your program director for the proceedings. I am a research associate at the Center for Gender and Africa Studies, and I'm very proud to be involved in this process. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. On your seats, there were copies of programs handed out, so you can see exactly where we are on the program and what still needs to happen as we go ahead. Can I just ask one favor, please? Those little pestilential cell phones, shall we switch them off or just put them on silent or vibrate or whatever the mode is called on your particular cell phone? If you can just switch that off so that we don't have disturbances there. Take my word for it, life goes on outside there, and you can take a break from it for an hour or two. Afterwards, it still will be there, and you can access it via all of your links there. So just the cell phones, please. It's a great privilege for me to ask Mr. Monde Madiba, Deputy Director of UFS Library Services, to officially welcome us to the proceedings this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. It's on. Yes. Thanks, Willem. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to, on behalf of the library director, the management, the staff across all campuses, to welcome you. As the library, when we started with this initiative of book launches, we wanted to create a platform where the authors, the students, and the entire university community meet so that we can be able to engage on different issues. And today we're also excited to be part of this a book launch by the Reverend Dr. Liz, titled Peacemaking and Peacebuilding in South Africa. And I cannot wait to hear, and as I was going through the book, it reminded me of the time when I was a little bit younger in the 90s, listening to songs like Chico Twala, Papa Papa Stop the War, and listening to songs by musicians in South Africa who were talking about peace. And it also reminded me of the time when Brenda Fassie in the 90s song, don't kill that person because you'll need him or you'll need her. So that was all about what was happening at the time. And we were in need of peace. Some people say we were on the brink of civil war. So I'm just, like I'm sure there's the members of the audience, you're also looking forward to hearing from Dr. Liz about that time when we were on the brink of war, of civil war, as to what is it that was taking place. And this book comes at the correct time, even when we're looking at what is happening in the world. There's a lot when it comes to what is happening, the wars. We are in need of peace. And I think even though it addresses the South African situation, we've always been called a model country. I think what is contained here will also assist the whole world, so maybe to finally achieve what the peace that we really need. Thanks, Dr. Liz. I understand you landed yesterday. I hope you're fine. Bromfontein weather sometimes can be take you out from someone who's coming from outside if you're not used to it, but I'm hoping that you're coping, and in the next few days and in the next few hours I'm hoping the members of the audience also are going to engage you, and we're looking forward, as the library we always say, we're looking forward to the next book launch. So this one, we're done with it. We're looking forward to you starting another one, because when it comes to peace, it's something that is ongoing. We want you to move beyond 1994, maybe to, who knows, 2014. So to all of you, just want you to relax and be ready And the doctor, I can see she's also ready, and I cannot wait. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, ladies, the whole thing with the microphones is due to the fact that we're recording so that all of this can be uploaded onto YouTube and all kinds of channels for you guys to peruse later on, and for those unfortunate ones who cannot be here this afternoon. So bear with us as far as the sound processes are concerned. Mr. Madiba, thank you very much. Purpose of the day, why am I here? Why are you guys here? I think if you have been following the news over the past couple of weeks, the book plays off, as the slide says, 1991 to 1994. And I'm fast forwarding that to literally last week. If you've been following the press in the past couple of weeks, you would have noticed that, well, the presidency and a couple of other role players are very determinedly trying to put together a national consultation, a national dialogue. And the president has been talking about that for a long time, and we've all awaited that. And now that it is happening, it's not really happening. And I just smiled and I thought by myself, this is so typical South African. Even before we've actually started talking about the topics, we're fighting about the methodology, which makes me flabbergasted about South Africans, but also makes me proud of South Africans. When we don't like something, we talk. We say it. We engage about that. And if you had a look at the news on Friday, you would have seen that many of the civil society foundations have withdrawn from the planning process, not the whole process. And that's a pity, but it's a process. And I think very often it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. My personal opinion is that a national dialogue is of such importance that even though it might take a while, even though we might have many steps backward in moving forward, it'll be worth it, because we do need to sit down and talk to one another again. And when I say again, it's not the first time that we've done this. This is what this book is about, amongst others, how, 31 years ago and more, 35 years ago, we started talking to each other, the late 80s, the early 90s. Now, I don't want to point at anybody here, but those with the grey hairs will remember that clearly. Some will remember it vaguely, and some were not born then. And I respect all of these ages. But we're not reinventing the wheel. We're merely redoing something that we did very successfully some 30 years ago. And I think it's important that we listen to what our previous generation, some of those leaders are still playing a role today, what they did, and learn from them and repeat their accomplishments, not their mistakes, but also add to that our new input, youthful vigor, and some of the lessons that we've learned over the last 30 plus years. So it's kind of, back to the future, or how shall you name it, right? We need to learn and use that information. So for me, it's very important, and I don't think a book launch like this or talking about this topic could have come at a better time than now. So let's listen attentively, and also, please, guys, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So if you have any questions, jot them down, and we can pose them to Liz then afterwards. The event is, let's say, co-sponsored by the library and then the Center for Gender and Africa Studies. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Professor Stephanie Kaywood, the director of CGAS, to the floor, the stage, call it what you will, Steffi. And you can speak from there as well if you want to. Prof. Kaywood.
It's much safer from this position, I think. Thank you very much, Willem. I appreciate it. Welcome, Dr. Carmichael. We're so happy to host you and have you here with us. So on behalf of the Center for Gender and Africa Studies, I can say that we are very pleased to be part of this wonderful occasion with the library. The publication of this book is timely and allows us to reflect on this part of our collective history, which I think we often take for granted. The relatively peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy is much lauded, but often glosses over the fact that between 1990 and 1994, violence was escalating in many parts of South Africa, and that we were poised on the edge of a knife. The fact that we held, for the most part, peaceful elections for the first time in April 1994 was a great achievement, and I believe can be attributed partly to the National Peace Accord and the efforts from people from across the spectrum to ensure South Africa did not fall into the never-ending cycle of civil war, which we see in so many other post-colonial countries. While the spectre of civil war may seem far-fetched from where we stand today, I believe we came far closer than many of us realized, had it not been for politicians, activists, and ordinary people committing to the peace process between 1991 and 1994. Often South African history is predicated upon the actions of great icons like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Walter Sisulu, and Oliver Tambo. But what this wonderful book illustrates is the essential role ordinary South Africans played during this process, who I believe are the unsung heroes of our transition story. The so-called South African miracle never would have happened had it not been for ordinary South Africans. And I think this is a fact we must hold on to and be inspired by as we try to find our new place in this fractured world. So Dr. Carmichael, we will be listening attentively.
Thank you, Professor Kaywood. I spoke about the different generations playing a role, and can I invite somebody from, I don't want to call it a previous generation, from an older generation then, to come and share the experiences of that time with us. Now, the National Peace Accord led to the creation of the National Peace Secretariat, which was to a large extent the executive arm that was tasked with shorter-term conflict resolution and socio-economic reconstruction and development at that stage. And it was based on a regional basis. And Mr. Jan Grevenstein was the regional director of the Free State Peace Directorate in 1994. And at that stage, he was made available from the Department of Justice, if I'm correct. And he's still in the Department of Justice as a senior magistrate in Bloemfontein. So, Jan, it gives me great pleasure to allow you to the floor and to share your experiences of that time with us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Afternoon, Dr. Carmichael. 31 years ago, I've met you, and I'm very glad to be with you in the same room once again. Now, you've noted that I've struggled to walk until here, and 31 years ago, it was not like that. At that point in time, I was working for a few years already for the Department of Justice, and one of the requirements for the Peace Secretariat was that the head of the structure must be a magistrate in the different provinces. All the magistrates were old like I am now, and they've just declined. And to a certain extent, I was forced into the position by the then head Chief Magistrate, Mr. Lewis. He indicated to me, you are interested in politics, you are young, you must take the chance and the opportunity to do the job. And what a trip it was. And I think I must just take you a little bit back. It was a difficult period of time. In 1988, I've started off in 1987, and in 88 I invited my interpreter in court to my flat. It was not done at that stage. No interaction whatsoever between different races, and it was on different levels very difficult. Amongst the Afrikaner community, two totally different groups. One group, the majority at the end, voting yes for reform, and a smaller group voting no. At the end, we arrived at this juncture. I was asked to start a process I've appointed 54 staff members, 27 black people, 27 white people. I've appointed 27 women and 27 male. And it was possible for me to talk to the entire peace committees. At that point in time, names like Kaiser Sebutelu, chairperson of the ANC in the Southern Free State, played a major role, magnificent guy, without a thumb. That's another story. Ace Magashule, Northern Free State. We managed to start talking to one another, business involved, university involved, from all different parts of society. Once a week later, there was a meeting, and each and every appointment was supposed to be a consensus appointment. Quite difficult. So in the appointment of the 54 staff members, that in itself was a major plus point for the peace process in the Free State. We managed to set up 10 different sub-offices, a big office in Bloemfontein. 2 of my fellow colleagues at that point in time present, one of them, Willem Ellis, and he was appointed with Keribone Manelane as part of one of the 4 conflict resolution teams. They were very much effective. Keribone was involved in the PIC, and that opened up a lot of doors. Also Playfair Marule, later on he was ambassador in India. He was appointed to a certain extent in this 3rd Department, Socio-Economic Reconstruction and Development, and he also assisted us in creating stability, and people started to trust us. It was a very interesting 2 years. We started off in March 1993. We ended a little bit more than a year later officially with the election. We managed to solve a lot of critical conflict in the Free State between especially rural people from different cultures. At the end, just to make on a lighter note, initially the most interesting thing for me was to predict what's going to happen in any small town. The old guard, the mayor, arrived there with his golden chain. He portrayed a certain image. He thought power lies in the chain. They've lost each and every discussion, hands down. All of a sudden, I've realized from my perspective, there's something brewing in the system. We are heading in a certain direction. I was very much impressed with all the people I've met. A wonderful experience. We were accompanied on a daily basis by representatives from United Nations. They went with us. Just on a personal note, in Vrede, I managed to sit down 17 meetings between the far right and the ANC to a certain extent, and we managed to solve it at the end. So I want to say thank you very much, Dr. Carmichael, for writing down everything that has happened in South Africa to a certain extent, and that's a sorry point. We've missed the boat in totality. There's no writing about the entire peace process. It was a magnificent structure. I think 45 peace committees were formed, some of them more successful than others. In Zastron, for instance, they've started with massive socio-economic reconstruction programs, vegetation, food plans, etc., etc., and a very good cooperation between different opposing sides supposed to be of the community. Unfortunately, and that's politics, the moment when it was the end of, when the election was finished, it was also the end of the entire Peace Secretariat. And to my mind, that was a very big mistake. They should have continued with this entire process in creating good understanding amongst all people. Now we are faced with national dialogue, and I was thinking the past week or so also about this. There's one big difference between now and then. Now we are faced with a constitution, an excellent constitution, I may say. We are also, there's a parliament. And it's possible for everyone through parliament to make their voice heard. So to a certain extent, the legality of this new process is causing, to my mind, a few desperate questions. There's a need for Parliament perhaps to play a more vocal role, to be more at the front, to invite people more to come and talk to them and to be part of general society. I'm not a politician, therefore I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen on the 15th of August, on Friday. On the 14th of September 1991, a magnificent process has formally started. And there's no one better to introduce this entire process to you than Dr. Carmichael. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I have not seen that symbol for 30 years and more. Before I introduce Dr. Carmichael, Jan, just this one question. I know Q&A is at the end, but I can't wait with this one. If all of the appointments were done on a consensus basis, how the heck was I appointed? But let's leave that later. Okay, thank you very much. Right, and as I was quoted in the book, it was the best year of my life, very much so. I had the privilege of picking Liz up at the airport yesterday and hosting her at my house last night for dinner, and we had a magnificent conversation. My wife and I with Liz, and she's an old South African hand, make no mistake. She's been around here as a medical doctor since the 70s, and working in Soweto, working in Baragwanath, and she mentioned working in Baragwanath in 1976 when Soweto was a little bit of an unstable environment to be in, and that just took me back as well. But also going back to Oxford and studying, religion, and also then becoming an academic doctor in that environment. So she's a reverend, and she's a medical doctor, and she's an academic doctor. So I think that kind of gives her the credentials to have an opinion around here. So Liz, it's really, really special not having seen you for about 11 years or so after you did the interviews for the book. To welcome you back in Bloemfontein in South Africa, and she's been launching books all over the country for the last week or so, or last 2 weeks basically, and will continue to do so after she leaves Bloemfontein. So it's quite a process and quite a journey. So Liz, thank you very much. Thanks for the book. I agree with Jan. Not enough has been written about that time. Not enough research has been done about that. And we might miss learning the lessons that we could have. But let's be bright and let's listen, and to the young people here, don't repeat our mistakes. Do things better than we did them. Liz, I'm going to set up this microphone for you in the stand, and then you can work from there. So Liz is going to use a PowerPoint presentation with some video inserts as well. Liz, the floor is yours.
Get it? Yes, that's it. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Willem. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for coming. And my grateful thanks to the library and the centre for making this book talk possible. Thank you. I'm really delighted to be in the Free State and in Bloemfontein and at this university, because when I was going around interviewing people for the book in places that I didn't know, because I only really knew what had happened around Johannesburg before I started researching, I was very much helped by Jan and Willem and Willem, and sorry that a number of people I'd have loved to talk to had already passed on by then, but I got a great story from the Free State, and we'll have a bit more of it as I carry on in this presentation. So this book, which these copies were printed in Cape Town very recently, although there is an international edition based in England as well. This particular book is the most complete and up-to-date version. It came out first in 2022, but I was adding things even last year and making some little corrections in the index. It really is difficult to get the index right. So I hope that some of you at least will feel that you would like to have the book and it is available afterwards. So I'm going to talk about the National Peace Accord. Yep, thank you. So then, oops. Sorry. So South Africa is a large and very diverse community, a large and very diverse nation, an important one. And in the book I briefly outline how all the different parts of the population of South Africa came together. I won't spend time on that now, but we are in South Africa. How do you deal with such diversity? In 1948, when a general election came, South Africa was kind of crawling towards possibly a liberal and open society, but there were many forces against that. And although not by a majority of the voters, but by a majority of parliamentary seats, the National Party came into power in 1948 with its manifesto as the policy of apartheid, separateness. And this is a picture of South Africa as it was as we came towards 1990. And the apartheid government had set up these 10 Bantustans, homelands, and told all the black African population, you are no longer a citizen of South Africa, so go to Gazankulu or Bophuthatswana or Transkei and get a passport from them, which of course were not recognized internationally. It was a cruel policy. But as we came towards 1990, these little things still existed, and those were one of the problems for reincorporation as we came towards 1994. So here, just to remind you, is the picture of South Africa with all its little Bantustans, homelands. And what was the violence? By 1990, there were two interconnected conflicts, and both involved violence. So across the whole of the country, the majority of the people were against the apartheid government and its security forces, and mostly in opposition to the Bantustan governments, of which there were 10, and of which 4 had taken independence, which meant that they had diplomatic relations with Pretoria and nowhere else, because nowhere else recognized them. And the independent ones also had defense forces, little armies. 3 of them had promptly had military coups. Then the other conflict, interrelated, was the grassroots low-intensity civil war beginning in the mid-1980s over strikes and general disagreement with the homeland government and the incorporation of bits and pieces of KwaZulu of Natal KwaZulu into KwaZulu. So a grassroots low-intensity civil war confined to parts of Natal KwaZulu, hotspots, between UDF, ANC COSATU supporters, and Inkatha, led by Chief Buthelezi. It was a very messy business. When Mandela was released in February of 1990, there were 2 expectations. One was that he would meet Buthelezi. They knew each other. They had corresponded when Mandela was in prison. And they would sort out the violence between their followers. That didn't happen because the hawks in the ANC prevented Mandela for a whole year from meeting Buthelezi. And meanwhile, things got worse. The other expectation was that quite soon multi-party talks would begin to devise at least an interim constitution under which the first democratic election could be held. Well, there was no sign of multi-party talks. All that happened for those first 18 months or so was a little series of bilateral talks between the ANC alliance and the government, mostly about security matters, such as simply who qualified as a political prisoner and therefore must be released, and how to get exiles into the country safely. So, and the violence then spread because Inkatha became a political party as the Inkatha Freedom Party and began to recruit, particularly in the labour hostels of the Reef. So the violence spread to the townships around Johannesburg. So here's the sequence, just to run through it. De Klerk unbanned the liberation movements and then released Mandela in February 1990. Bilateral talks were proceeding slowly. In January of 1991, the ANC and IFP finally had a peace meeting, but came up with a declaration of peace which was not worth very much because it had no implementation structures and it fell apart immediately. April 1991, the ANC, which blames the government for all the violence, threatens to end talking with the government, and that could have meant a slide back into general conflict. In May-September 1991, something happens, allowing CODESA to open on the 20th of December, and that is a full multi-party process. And after some hitches in those conversations, an interim constitution is drawn up, and in April 1994, the first democratic election is held. And then finally, the TRC is formed in 95 and sits from 96 to 98. That's quite important to place the TRC in its proper place at the very end of this process, and to get your sequencing right. So what happened in May-September 1991? Remember, the ANC has threatened to stop talking. and it's a moment of national crisis. Before this, both the churches and business had formed vehicles through which they could make a progressive input into the coming transition. The churches had met at a hotel near Rustenburg at the end of 1990, formed the Rustenburg Committee, which included a greater range of churches than the South African Council of Churches, and in particular the Dutch Reformed Church, White Charismatics, and so on. Business, in 1988, had formed what was called the Consultative Business Movement, which had the freedom to act progressively. It had a staff of facilitators who went round talking to the politicians, and became an important interface between business and the politicians. And the leadership of those two organizations got together at this moment of crisis in April-May 1991 and formed this facilitating group, which you can see in this picture. I'll just point to the dramatis personae. Here is Domini Professor Johan Heyns, head of the DRC. Next to him, a DRC layman, Lo Alberts, who was a physicist and was a government scientific advisor, completely trusted by de Klerk and his government. Then, rather hidden, is John Hall from the Barlow Rand Corporation, who became the chair of the National Peace Committee. Frank Shikani, Secretary General of the South African Council of Churches. Bobby Godsall, who's one of the eminent persons now for the dialogue. He was the head of human resources for Anglo-American and very involved and experienced in labour relations, mediations. Then Jabu Mabuza from Black Business, Khotsa Umgojo, the president of the South African Council of Churches, Ray Macaulay from the charismatic church Rhema, which operated on a multiracial basis and put feelers out to politicians and had created a fairly solid relationship with Buthelezi. Desmond Tutu, Archbishop. Currey of the Indian Reformed Church and an expert on Islam and lecturer on Islam at UNISA. Sean Cleary, an ex-South African diplomat who had moved out of the diplomatic service to form his own mediation consultancy and had worked with the ANC and IFP in KwaZulu-Natal, funded by business. So Sugar funded his mediations between the ANC and IFP leadership in Natal, and they met every week at the Durban Club, secretly. And this is Sam Mutsunyane of Black Business. So these remarkable characters became a facilitating committee and offered themselves to the political process. The ANC was quite happy to have them. The government at first said that church and business people had no business in politics and had no role to play, but then finally were really persuaded that it was necessary to accept this group. And Buthelezi remained very reluctant and sceptical, but in the end came and signed the accord and did send his representatives. So on the 22nd of June 1991, this facilitating group, with all its many lines out to the politicians, managed to get everyone that mattered except for the white conservative right, the Conservative Party and the AWB. They refused to come because this whole thing, they said, was a communist plot. So they refused, but everybody else was there, including the PAC and AZAPO, who said that they would come and declare themselves for peace, but they wouldn't sign anything that the government signed, because that would be to recognise the government. So they all came together at Barlow Park. And 3 months later, they had managed to negotiate the National Peace Accord, which was historic for at least these 3 reasons. It was the first multiracial, multi-party consensus agreement in the whole of South Africa's history. The fact that it existed and was signed opened the way for CODESA, and it created implementation structures at national, regional and local levels. And those became a real safety net for the country. They held, they grew, people didn't walk out of them. They resolved conflicts and mobilized the people for peace ahead of the election of 1994. The National Peace Accord, and this is an actual copy, is a little booklet of 33 pages and 10 chapters. And it covers these matters. Oh, sorry. First of all, it's a declaration of our common purpose to end political violence, and that the establishment of a multi-party democracy in South Africa is our common goal. Again, the first time that on a broad front South Africans had agreed on that. Then how to get there. So we have a code of conduct for political parties and organisations, under which the political parties quite literally agree not to kill each other, not to hinder their supporters from going to meetings and rallies and so on, and not to intimidate anyone on the ground of their political opinions. And at the end of that little chapter, there is the provision for informing not only the authorities but also each other of their plans for rallies, funerals, marches and so on. And that led to the possibility of monitoring those sorts of events, which made a huge difference to the violence. Planning events in advance and having mediators ready on the ground to head off any problems, and of course to liaise with the police and army. And then provisions for the police and army, simple things like wearing your name and painting numbers on police vehicles, and generally moving towards the philosophy of community policing, which the police were actually keen to take up. Then measures to facilitate socio-economic reconstruction and development. It's a very short chapter, but it has all the fundamentals of community development. The Commission of Inquiry, the Goldstone Commission, was part of the Peace Accord, so that if there was a major incident that needed investigating, you could put that onto Goldstone's agenda, and investigations would be carried out. And that took the heat off the peace committees. The National Peace Secretariat was the engine room of the whole process, and had its own very tight, very hard-working and very stable multi-party committee chaired by a lawyer, Anthony Gildenhuys. There were regional and local dispute resolution committees, as they were originally called, but they were quite quickly called peace committees because everybody called them that, and it became official in 1993. There were 11 regions, of which the Free State was one, and in the end, 263 local peace committees. And there was the National Peace Committee, where a lot of organising of activities went on, and the politicians, that was where the top politicians like Mbeki, for example, sat, and could have arguments there and resolve disputes, take that off the agenda of the constitutional talks. And forcing the peace agreement really meant a little investigating committee and then naming and shaming, and that actually worked. So on the 14th of September 1991, the peace accord is ready and is signed by all the top leadership in the presence of a glittering gathering of 400 delegates and the world's media at the Carlton Hotel. Desmond Tutu, one of the facilitators, greeting de Klerk, and in between them is Gobi Coetzee, who had taken a leading role in the secret talks with Mandela in prison. At the end of those proceedings, Desmond Tutu led a prayer, and before that he told a funny story, and that is why de Klerk, Mandela and Buthelezi are all laughing. 23 signatories signed for 29 different organisations, the reason being that for several homelands the same signatory signed for the ruling party and for the government. So 11 regions were formed under the National Peace Secretariat, and you can see the Free State as one region. Ciskei kind of signed, and then was quite a problem. And Bophuthatswana didn't sign, nor did Venda or Transkei. So there was a on-off relationship between those governments and the peace structures. And here's an organogram showing how the peace structures developed over time, with more and more activities going under the National Peace Secretariat, because that was where the money was. That was funded by government. So socioeconomic reconstruction and development, publicity, training, and facilitators able to be sent by the Peace Secretariat. This is the first training of regional chairpersons, and somewhere here in this picture are the Reverend Simon Mabunda, who was a Methodist minister, and Henry Lerham, whom I did manage to find and interview at his boutique hotel in Hermanus that he was running. I don't know if anybody can identify Henry Lerham or Simon Mabunda in this picture, but if you can, I'd be delighted to know which is which. Sort of in the middle is Anthony Hildenhuis. There's Anthony, the chair, an amusing and very hard-working lawyer who kept the National Peace Secretariat on track and was indefatigable in his work. And next to him is the rector, vice-rector of the University of the Western Cape, Professor Jaap Durand, who chaired Western Cape. And here we come down to grassroots, and this is part of the Alexandra Local Peace Committee, which called itself for most of its existence the Interim Crisis Committee, because that was its brand image. It started on April Fool's Day 1992, when there was open warfare in Alexandra, and a small group of 5 were deputed to go and sort out the war. By September, there was much more cohesion in Alex, and here on the committee we've got displaced people, hostile people, IFP, ANC, police, the army, the churches, business, all busy sorting out a vision for Alexandra and working on the ground, and that was absolutely key. Here is what local peace committees were supposed to do: to create trust and reconciliation, to prevent violence and intimidation, to settle disputes, and to create a forum for the planning of marches, rallies, funerals and events. So that's where you start. And being on the ground was absolutely sine qua non. We agreed at the beginning that we would meet very frequently, perhaps every day, and would... something happened. and that we would go to every incident and find out what had happened, and also find out what people thought had happened and what they proposed to do about it, which was usually some kind of act of revenge, and try and create a more constructive response. Are we winning? This is a Casper, in case anybody is not sure what it's called. And the picture was taken by the great photographer Peter Magubani outside the main men's hostel in Alex. What can we do? Oh, okay. We are rebooting apparently. Oh, good. Back to slideshow. Right. Good. Phew. Okay. We met at the beginning. One of our artistic members made our badges and our logo. So that's the ICC logo. Eventually, we had the official logo and proper badges. Christmas 1992, in the middle, Colonel Alexander of the paratroopers, who was an excellent member of the Peace Committee. On his right, Lucas Corza, a grand old man of Inkatha in Alexandra, and on his left, an ANC representative. And this again is monitoring. This is when monitoring is beginning to get going in a big way. 1993. This is on the East Rand. And this is the 21st of March 1993, Sharpeville Day, when both the IFP and the ANC had organised rallies. It emerged about 2 weeks before they were due to happen. One in the Phosphorus Stadium, the other in the Catley Hong Stadium. So meetings were held with the OFP and ANC and the police and the monitors of the Witswil Peace Secretariat to organise that day. And one of the things was to make sure that the rallies would end 2 hours apart, but it rained and other things happened, and the rallies ended simultaneously. So instantaneous mediation had to be done as these two armies approached each other towards a main crossroads in Katlehong. And it was agreed that the IFP would wheel in one direction and the ANC would wheel in the other direction, turning at the crossroads, and that peace monitors who had just got these day-glow orange things would stand across the crossroads diagonally so that the two armies of 5,000 or more each could pass safely without touching each other. And they did, and nobody got killed. But if the peace monitors had not been there, if the arrangements through the Peace Secretariat had not been there, there could have been a major battle. Dennis Beckett, a leading journalist of the time, was there and said, "For that you never heard of Nyoni Bridge," that's a bridge close to the crossroads, "be thankful." So, Free State. As Jan was saying, the staff was some 50 strong, balanced for gender and race, and here are most of them at the time of the election, with Jan right in the middle. Here. You've got hair. And I think is this William on the end here? And Willem, where are you? Sorry? Which one are you? Top left, did you say? Anyway, there are lots and lots of great staff. So these are the sub-regional coordinators, 5 of them, and that's William, Humphrey, Barnard, Stein, Nicole, Talks, and they are celebrating the election, during which the peace structures in the Free State, like everywhere else, did a great deal of rescuing the election from disaster when, for example, voting stations ran out of papers or ink, or farmers tried to prevent their staff going to vote, and so on. So southern Free State and welcome staff teams. And then we move to the international observers. Jan mentioned that the UN came. We had a UN observer mission in South Africa for 2 years, and they came accompanied by the European Union, African Union, and Commonwealth. And here we've got trainers from the London Metropolitan Police, that's the woman in the middle, and from the Zimbabwe Police, training party marshals for the IFP and ANC, and also some for the NP. Publicity was a huge enterprise. It was done by leading advertising agencies, and this was the first advert. On TV it could be live. It started with 2 hands pointing at each other, and then suddenly they open and they clasp each other. And this is the logo that you saw before. when Jan seized upon the cloth that's here and opened it out. And literally millions of T-shirts were made. Literally millions. And everybody wanted the T-shirt. If you didn't have a T-shirt, you could have a cap, you could have car stickers. Backwards, isn't it? Is that better? And little plastic buttons, millions of little plastic buttons were distributed. You could also have a cap. And it became the logo of the structures, and peace monitors in many parts of the country had these orange bibs. Oops, here's the top there. Which we jokingly referred to as our bulletproof vests. Monitors were trained and deployed in units, either on foot or in cars. And they just made a great difference to all sorts of events. Right through the election, when we fielded 18,500 peace monitors across the country. And even after the election, you couldn't really have an event without peace monitors. Peace Day was the 2nd of September 1993. And for many people, it was a pre-run for what happened at the election. It was a day of peace. At midday, all the radios and TV channels stopped for a minute of silence. People came out of their offices and homes and held hands in the street in many places. And then the radio and TV played the peace song, which was, by the way, composed by Selo Chikatwala on a commission from the National Peace Committee. And it became really the national anthem for some time. So ANC and IFP monitors walking from East Rand to Durban. The East Rand was a difficult place where there are 3 townships which have no common identity. They are attached to different white municipalities, or were, and they never had an overarching peace committee. It was suggested, and I think would have been a great help, but they didn't. So unlike Soweto, which is a similar size, they were prone to fall apart over stresses to do with the violence. And in Thokoza particularly, Robert McBride was sent to organise the SDUs, which he did only too efficiently. So Port Shepstone, a real hotspot, and looking after a very large area of southern Natal KwaZulu. But this is a mixed teams of IFP and ANC playing soccer on Peace Day. And above them in the sky were a couple of South African Air Force jets letting off blue and white smoke. And they went round the country doing that. Bloemfontein for Peace. This balloon was an initiative of the churches in Bloemfontein, and it's being flown from the top of the City Hall, where the Regional Peace Committee had its offices. There's the mayor and other worthies. Jackie Mofokeng, Miss South Africa, dedicated her year to peace. And the textile workers did overtime for free before New Year to create another million, and it was over 1 million, T-shirts for the beginning of 1994 as a year of peace. And peace became cool. Lots and lots of the monitors, you had to be 18, but many monitors were young people from the townships. So a typical peace monitor unit would be in touch with the Joint Operations Control Centre for the day. An election rally and election day. Peter Story presiding Methodist bishop and other monitors in Soweto. Just a few of the 18,500 deployed across the country. And if I may play a little part of a documentary on Alexandra and the peace there, that brings it down to grassroots as well. And meanwhile, I'd just like to read, I can find my specs here, to read a couple of passages about what happened in the Free State. Thank you, that's it. So, academic Willem Adendorf started as a field worker in February 1993. After training, he was paired with Moses Joani as a conflict resolution team covering the South. And, he says, I remember many times that I wore the same clothes for 3 days where we needed to intervene and you couldn't leave the situation because that whole thing was depending on your being there, because that was the only anchor or perceived anchor that community had. The aim was to create a platform where people could find their own solutions. Conflicts ranged from boycott situations in small towns, with racial tensions and destruction of property, to lethal fighting between Sotho and Pondo miners at a gold mine. Among this remarkable cohort of field workers, the names of Advocate Kenneth Khumalo, Stephanie Smith, and Kedibone Francis Manalani stand out. Manalani was the provincial chair of the PAC, which joined the OFS peace structures in April 1993. Aged 55, he had trained in Tanzania and spent 10 years on Robben Island. He was paired with Willem Ellis, aged 26, and based in Vicksburg near the Lesotho border, a hotspot for taxi conflicts and militant whites. Ellis says, we spent a year together in the car, best year of my life. The team, said Adendorf, achieved deeply authentic relationships, bridges that we built between people, firstly among ourselves, but which translated externally to be able to build bridges in communities. And then particularly on SERD, that is Socioeconomic Reconstruction and Development, central coordinators were appointed, again in pairs, Annick Olivier and the Reverend Nico de Klerk, and Telkom gave a large gift, partly for education and technical training, partly for free telephone installation for development organisations and the elderly and the disabled, and partly for community development projects. And the Free State managed, before the election, to establish a local peace committee in 54 of its 74 small towns. Initially, most had no CERD involvement, but after the election, this efficient region smartly reoriented itself. In June, Olivier could report that its regional CERD committee had formed on the 24th of May, 1994, and 2 CERD workshops had been held for peace personnel. 17 staff, mainly field workers, were now concentrating on CERD, and the region's conflict resolution function had been incorporated into CERD. What better for peace building in this farming province than to impart skills in agriculture? Funding was secured for a large vegetable garden project on a farm close to Zastron, where 2 women, one being the descendant of a British trading family from Lesotho, formed the local CERD team. If it was possible to manage that system after 94, if it had been possible, it could have been a beautiful success story, says Jan Gravenstein. Similarly, CERD negotiated with the Vicksburg municipality to use a piece of land along the Caledon River that was lying fallow for food gardens. When the closure of the peace structures came, this project was about to start. Field worker Willem Ellis reflects, the elite had made peace, but this was grassroots making peace, or being given the opportunity to move in that direction, and it was taken away. Sorry, we seem to have crashed again. And a list of about 100 possible or incipient development projects were identified by this region's field workers and local peace committees, only to face a lack of support and funding as the closure of the peace structures loomed. Hello.
The projector seems to be overheating. It looks like it's going to be a recurring problem. So I think press on. I know there's some stuff that we're going to miss out, if you don't mind. It's just going to happen.
Okay. The thing is, what I'd like to do now is just show you a short video clip. So we do need the projector.
Looks like it's rebooting and recuperating.
Oh yes, good. Okay.
I think if it fails again, press on.
Yep. Oh, great. Okay, let's go. This has got sound, so do you need to do something magic to make it start?
You can just play.
We call on all South Africans to stop killing the future of our country with violence. Peace Day on Thursday the 2nd of September, for the whole country to uphold the 5-minute standstill and to reach out to one another. Peace Day, the 2nd of September. It's in our hands.
This was already the evening of Peace Day.
Tonight on agenda, peace at home. After long months of bloody conflict, peace comes to Alexandra. And peace abroad. Prospects for peace in the Middle East as the Israeli government and the PLO reach agreement. Good evening. Making peace is harder than making war. That's what Adlai Stevenson said in 1946, and it's as true today. Tonight, near the close of South Africa's Day for Peace, we look at two present-day landmarks in ending current conflicts. So we begin with Alexandra Township near Johannesburg, where battles in the streets have turned into a battle for peace. Agenda producer Ina Jabbar went to see how it was done.
This was Alexandra just last year. Early in March, an all-out war erupted between former neighbours and friends. The people of Greater Alex thought they were being attacked by the hostel dwellers and those in the surrounding shacks, whereas the hostel inmates took the view that they were under attack from the people of the township. This was manifested in mutual hatred and a cycle of attacks and counterattacks. Fear and ignorance fueled the violence as mistrust, misconceptions, rumour and intimidation were the order of the day, each side failing to understand the reasons for the other's fear and anger. Policing was almost totally ineffective, with both sides seeing the police as partial to the other side.
Over the past 2 years, beginning from about March 1991 to about a year ago, this place was absolute shambles. We used to see people with high velocity gunshot wounds on a daily basis, sometimes seeing as many as 20, 30 people.
Looking at the streets of Alex today, it is almost impossible to believe that that was not a nightmare, but part of South Africa's reality. The violence-racked East Rand townships of Tembisa, Thokoza and Katlehong are just a few kilometers away. But in Alex, it seems as though peace has come to stay.
Compared with the appalling violence of last year, the answer is yes, there is peace. At the moment, there is not political violence of any kind. We haven't had any political killings, as we believe in Alexandra, in the whole of 1993.
There is a tenuous peace, we may call it.
It's a bit fragile, sort of, but there is some sign of peace coming on.
It's going to be last because at the moment we got some talks with every organization here at Alexandra.
Increasingly there is peace. People are beginning to trust the fact that there hasn't been killing and violence here and that they can now make peace. They can come out and speak to one another and really create a different society together.
And it was alleged that occupants of the Nyala had been...
For the members of the Alexandra Interim Crisis Committee, this newfound peace, though still fragile, is a triumph. Formed on the 1st of April last year when violence peaked, the ICC is a local structure of 25 volunteers that fall under the umbrella of the National Peace Accord. The ICC and its 4 task groups hold meetings almost daily. Their purpose, peace, reconciliation and reconstruction. At a time when large-scale negotiations are on a somewhat precarious footing, you might be surprised to see members of the ANC, the Inkatha Freedom Party, business, Women for Peace, the security forces, hostel dwellers, the displaced and other community organizations all sitting around a table, positively tackling the problems of bringing peace to their society.
And the way we did it is really an obvious way, but it worked. And that was, we talked and we talked and we talked and we talked. And somewhere we got absolutely nowhere. But the more we talked, the more it became clear that these people who were representing their political parties were beginning to see the other side's point of view.
We have been successful in this, that we have managed to get polarized groups talking.
But the process of reconciliation and active peacemaking in Alex is not restricted to meetings. A 24-hour monitoring patrol has been set up by the ICC, on which Mkhonto we Sizwe, the IFP, the South African Defence Force are all working together. At grassroots level, it is vital to establish exactly what is happening on the ground, listening to every perception and interpretation, constant communication with the security forces, rumour control, and disseminating the truth.
I think increasingly people are spontaneously bringing problems to the ICC and seeing it as an organisation which has the resources and the will to help.
You see, it's our duty to go and market the peace initiatives to them, not them coming to us, but we going to them. People here are for peace more than war, you see. So it's just a question of reminding them of peace, about peace.
Talks between the local executive of the ANC and IFP are still going slowly ahead, but in many instances, it's the people on the ground who are initiating peace moves. First, it was the residents who continued living around the hostels that wanted to speak to the IFP. Then the hostels declared peace early this year. Some of these peace moves have been truly remarkable. In March last year, a funeral procession was fired on as it moved to the cemetery, causing several deaths. This led to open warfare between the various factions in the community. Ironically, it was in March this year that the death and funeral of another resident, Maria Mnguni, finally seemed to bring the community together.
It was just that the person who had died belonged to both parts of the community. She had grown up in Alex, she was living in the area near the hostel. Everyone knew her as a good person, and they came together over her funeral.
People who would normally have not agreed to the funeral taking place in this town were there to say, we want to be part of this funeral. We want, if the family agrees, that this person is be buried in Alexandra, we will be part of it.
Both the IFP and the COSAS were monitoring the funeral together, and the no-go zone of Roosevelt Street was opened officially. That was a turning point too.
This is Roosevelt Street that runs past the M1 hostel. Today, the people of Alex move freely up and down the street, but just a few months ago, this was regarded as a no-go area.
Okay. If you don't mind my cutting that short just there, thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you very much, Liz. I think, except for the fact that you've been able to journey back into South African history 30 years ago, when this was a different world. Not just the hairstyles were different, but the whole country was different. You were privileged to see myself, VM, Jan, and Liz as younger people, right? Yes, also the hairstyles were different. We all had hair. Liz, if you don't mind. Liz, if you wouldn't mind taking a seat over there, and then we can have a bit of a Q&A. You've stood long enough. I know that you've monitored many marches in your day. You've deserved to sit down. So I think, yes, it's very difficult 30-something years later to realize what the situation was then. Different people, different ways of looking at things, a whole different culture, and addressing that. And it took a brave bunch to get that done. I'm going to ask. We can have a roving microphone. If there are any questions out there that you would like to pose to Liz, if she could address that from sitting down. You don't have to get up to answer your questions. So, and I'll hand her this microphone. Do we have another microphone there that can be used as a roving mic? Otherwise, thank you very much. Right. Any questions? Anybody that would like to pose a question? at this stage. About the process, about the people, about the parties. I was actually just to share a bit of an historic background. Last night I was sharing with Liz a ballot paper, the ballot paper that was used in 1994, and this was a ballot paper that was used by the IEC at that stage to do voter education, and it had all of the parties on there except for the IFP, because they only came on board the whole election process very soon, before the election started. And what was fascinating is, of all of those faces, of whom many had passed away, there was one gentleman that is still in Parliament today. Any guess? A political party leader that represented a party in 1994 that is still in Parliament today. His hairstyle has also changed. Kenneth Meshwe from the ACDP, right? The only one of that time, right? Quite interesting. Yeah. So that's surviving in politics for a long time. Any questions, guys? Please. I should have actually planted some questions in here. They do that. There we have. Lady over there. I'm going to hand the microphone to Liz. And yeah, so just speak up into the microphone that everybody can hear, and then we take it from there. Thank you, ma'am.
I don't think your mic is on. No, something wrong with that.
That one not working. All right, use this one.
Good afternoon, Dr. Liz. I must say it's such an honor to be in your presence. My question is mainly in relation to Peace Day, which was celebrated in September in the past. I just wanted to ask, why is it no longer celebrated in this day and age? Is it because we attained the peace we were looking for, but we still celebrate Freedom Day till this year? Thank you.
Are you fishing for an extra public holiday?
Well, that's a nice question. Thank you. As I said, the peace structures were dismantled. The cabinet in October of 1994 decided not to continue funding the peace committees. So really, there was nobody to organise. Well, there was actually. Some people got together and tried to restart a sort of peace and reconstruction movement, and they wanted a day in September of 1994, but to be honest, it didn't go very well because there was no big organisation behind it, and people had already had such huge emotional highs with the election and the installation of the president that it went rather flat, so nobody tried again. That's the history.
Any other questions? Thanks for breaking the ice and kicking off the questions there, right? Takes guts. Anybody else? PM, and then Mr. Madiba.
Hi, Liz. Yeah, thank you. I was one of the few guys that was privileged to be part of this process. And Liz, but, so many years later, asking the question, what do we currently need to learn as of today, from those experiences? And there was a lot of school fees that we paid during that process. So what can we learn? So it came at a cost. So what can we learn? And, I was your age at that time. So if we can bestow our lessons on a younger generation, so what can we tell? What can you tell them?
Well, maybe, is this working? Maybe you can give us some ideas yourself, but I think one of the fundamental things is that when there's a crisis, this country is good at responding. But that has to be with a determination that the process is the important thing and grandstanding is not. And civil society needs to be really involved. It was important that the facilitators were from civil society, and on the peace committees, it was always people from civil society, usually business or the churches or lawyers, who chaired and facilitated the whole process. Chairs of local peace committees, regional peace committees, and so on. So involves civil society. And maybe there has to be a real crisis. I'm not quite sure whether people feel the crisis enough at the moment. That's a question I have. I hope that people do. And I hope that the present problems with the organisation of something on the 15th, I really don't know whether... I do know that the eminent persons have advised that getting 1,000 people together would be completely unmanageable, and that it should only be 250 who come together on the 15th of August, if they do. And I think the state in which the preparations seem to be at the moment, it may be unwise to try that, but there we are. So that's something of the beginning of an answer.
Thanks, Doc. My question is based on Chief Buthelezi. I saw earlier, you spoke about him as an interesting character. There were doves in the ANC, those who didn't want, hawks who didn't want him to meet Mandela. And also there are people who are saying he went to the grave with some of the secrets. There are people who are saying they labeled him as a sellout. And in some quarters, he would say he was representing the ANC inside South Africa. He was getting instructions from the ANC or Tambo from exile. And I also I want to link it to what I just said about him coming to the elections at the last minute. Why? What made him to be reluctant and to join at a very late hour to be part of the new South Africa? Is there something that he was? Some people are saying he wanted to be like second to Mandela, and other people are saying that he wanted to take over. There are so many theories about him. Sounds like he was a very interesting character. I don't know what you can say about him.
Well, the IFP walked out of the discussion of the interim constitution because they said it did not give an important enough place to the traditional structures of KwaZulu, and particularly the monarchy. That was the stated reason. And what happened within the last fortnight before that election was that, first of all, there was Buthelezi agreed that there could be international mediation to try to bring IFP and KwaZulu into the election. And Lord Carrington and Henry Kissinger flew in with a team. Michael Cassidy of African Enterprise, evangelical church leader, Anglican layman, was shocked to see that there was no African in the group that Kissinger and Carrington were bringing. And so his mother actually paid the airfare for a guy called Washington Akumu, who had been involved in some church-led behind-the-scenes talks, the Newick Park talks. It's all in the book, by the way. He brought Washington Akumu to South Africa. Washington knew Kissinger a little from Harvard University. He attached himself to the main international team and was accepted by the parties and by the team. And Kissinger and Carrington decided after one day that they were not going to be able to solve this. And they flew off. They went. And so did all their team, except that Washington Akumu was persuaded to stay. And he spent the night of the 14th of April talking with the IFP's advisors in a hotel in Johannesburg after the other people had run away. And he then hoped to catch Buthelezi that morning to present a possible plan for bringing the IFP and KZ into the election. He missed Buthelezi, whose transport came earlier, and so Washington Akumu was racing to the airport in a taxi and phoning ahead, it was Lanseria Airport, to ask them to hold the plane and wait for him. And I now know it was the king who was also, King Zwelithini, was also on that flight with Buthelezi, said, no, we must go because I've got a meeting. In fact, with John Hall of the National Peace Committee and the church facilitators, Tutu and Kotsum Gojo and so on. So he was due down at Nongama near Ulundi. So their plane took off. And then 8 minutes later, it came back again. This is the miracle of the election. What had actually happened, and I've now spoken to the pilot and met him, it was that the instrument panel, just after they took off, showed that a vital safety feature was not working. And that safety feature is a rudder booster. Now, this is a little executive jet, which the government of KwaZulu was buying at the time. It's called a BAE 125. It's got two engines at the back. If one of them stops working, the plane will start going like this, yawing. And you need the rudder booster to keep it going on a straight line. So you can't fly when it's not working. So they came back to Lanseria. It took an hour for the pilot to find another plane from a friend. And meanwhile, Buthelezi and I presume King Zwelithini were able to talk with the Kumu, and the agreement that brought the IFP and KZ into the election began to be worked out. And probably part of it was about the Inganyama Trust, but that was rather kept. Well, it was kept for de Klerk to sign legislation before the election and so on. Anyway, that's how it happened, and it was the status of the kingdom that was the point at issue. I hope that helps. And by the way, the story is now in the book.
Dr. Liz? Yeah. I just wanted to get your sense as you're traveling around launching this book, the sense in the nation, how are they with regard to peacekeeping and peace building? What is it that you're picking up as you go on around launching your book and the feedback and discussions and questions?
Yeah. What strikes me most is how interested young people who have never heard of the peace accord are to discover that there was such a thing. Because it's a great story. It's an important story for South Africa and for peace studies generally. And South Africa deserves congratulations for having done it. So I think it's the pleasure of people at hearing about it that has been particularly striking. And also connecting with the present day, obviously, because that is an example of how South Africa got together to make a plan. And can you do it again?
Thank you, Liz. Gents, ladies, if you don't mind, I'm going to wrap it up there. We are just about at 2 o'clock, and some schedules have been planned around this. So, Liz, would you mind if there are I saw one or two hands, whether they can address you directly once we've wrapped up. So, are you okay with that?
Yes, and please, the books, there are books here.
Yeah.
I hope I've got enough for those who want them.
Could I ask you, Liz, the price of the book?
Students, $2.50.
Okay.
Other than students, I hope you're earning some money, it's $300.
Right. Okay.
And that is all less than a commercial price, and you can pay by EFT, I've got the instructions, or cash.
Okay. All right. So books are available if you should be interested. Guys, with the questions, I'm just going to wrap it up for the bigger group, and then please do speak to Liz directly so that she can answer it. So you have a private audience then. Unbelievable, no? This is a special offer, only for 300. Guys, sorry, yes, we are close to 2 o'clock, so I need to wrap up just to accommodate everybody that has other arrangements. Our guests that came in from outside, also important. I wonder, Liz, and I mean, this is a personal bugbear, the absence of peace studies to a large extent from our schools and to a certain extent from our universities. I think that is something that the South African society should really invest in going forward. So one day, if you're the rectors of the universities, please bring in peace studies and the like. I would like, just as a word of thanks, Lashan Naiker, Deputy Director of UFS Library Services, thank you very much. And so before I hand the microphone to you, I just would like to, from my side that made a lot of the arrangements, and I've done this a couple of times, Kecho and her team, I would like to thank them. I mentioned that to Mr. Madiba as well. We've had a fantastic reception and a fantastic enthusiasm from the library. So thank you very much for that. All of this, if I had to organize this, this would not be even remotely the same. So when you do give promotions and and bonuses, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Willem. Let me stand at the podium. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues. I have to say, when I looked at that peace symbol, I was 22 when that symbol was launched, so you can figure out my age. On behalf of the University of Free State Library and Information Services, I would like to thank our program director firstly, Willem. I must say you really did a splendid job in creating an inclusive atmosphere. Our partners, Prof. Stephanie Kaywood, from this, and our regional director of the Free State Peace Directorate in 1994, Mr. Jan Kravenstein, and to our author, who's done a splendid job. I must say, the timeline that you took us back, if you are a 70s child like me, it takes you right back to a timeline of what happened in the apartheid era. And I think something like that is, as custodians of information, the part of library services, that's our job, to keep this information for posterity so that others would know what really happened at that time. And if you look at the archives, the UFS archives is not very well publicized in the province, but the UFS archives, which forms part of the library, has a whole wealth of information which you could access. And so I must say, when our website gets up and running properly, and we're working with the digitization project at the moment, so many of the archival materials in the archives, at the UFS archives, will be digitized, so access will be made a bit more easier. And to the audience, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I think it was a wealth of information. Dr. Carmichael, the one thing I want to say, when I stand here at times, when I was looking at this presentation, I was thinking of the Free State itself. Sometimes when I stand in this podium, I just think back and I feel very extremely sort of proud that I'm here. And you would ask me why, and I'm not going to tell you why. I'm going to give you some homework. It goes back to the Orange Free State Act 29 of 1890. So I'm giving you that homework to check why I stand here proudly at times. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Dr. Carmichael.
I know the piece of legislation, but I'm not going to share it. And welcome. Gentlemen, ladies, again, I refer to the book that's available. Please speak to Dr. Carmichael regarding that if you should be interested. Our two people that pose the questions, please take up contact with her. And then an invitation from our side to show appreciation for you taking off time and making effort to be here. It's just behind outside, there's some eats for students, and then the staff members as well as the guests are invited to the break room. Kegel, where exactly is that? Right, you follow Kegel, the lady here with the white, the efficient one. She got us here, she'll get you there. So guys, thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for being interested, asking great questions. And yeah, so we'll see you somewhere in peace, not pieces, in future. All right, thank you very much, guys. And again, Liz, thank you very much for your effort and time.